Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Well, as hard as it is to believe, we are now at the tail end of 2024. If you've been tuning into the channel for a while now, then you likely know that that can mean only one thing. It's time for another quarterly installment of Dumbest International Criminals, our compilation series where we take a look at some of the dumbest criminals and crime stories from all over the world that we've covered so far in a given year on Crimes of the Week International. One thing to keep in mind is that these segments have not been edited since they appeared in their respective lists, so minor details and things like specific charges may have been updated since we first covered them. Also, if you like these videos, be sure to let us know in the comments section below. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Representatives from England's Newcastle Crown Court say that a 53-year-old doctor pleaded guilty to attempted murder last week after he carried out a wild plot earlier this year which was intended to take the life of his elderly mother's live-in boyfriend. The whole thing started in late January of 2024, when the victim, 72-year-old Patrick O'Hara, went to a hospital complaining of an injury to his arm. The elderly man said that he'd been given what he believed was a COVID booster shot several days earlier, and that since then he had been experiencing a large amount of pain and discomfort. When doctors checked out Patrick's injury, they were incredibly disturbed by what they found. It turned out that what he had been given was no vaccine. Instead, he had been injected with a toxic chemical used in pesticides, one that had caused him to contract a rare flesh-eating disease. Luckily, doctors were able to figure this out in time, and Patrick's life was saved. Even so, he had to spend weeks in the intensive care unit and ended up losing part of his arm. After getting involved in the case, police pieced together what had happened. The person who had injected Patrick was the son of his longtime girlfriend, Jenny Lung. The man's name was Thomas Kwan, a 53-year-old Hong Kong-born doctor who lived in the city of Stockton-on-Tees. According to reports, Kwan was jealous of Patrick's relationship with his mother and also feared that he would get in the way of his inheritance. Specifically, he was angered by changes his mother had made to her will, which stated that Patrick could continue living in her home following her death if she passed away before he did. During their investigation, police discovered that Kwan had plotted for months to kill Patrick and had researched and explored a number of different potential poisons. A subsequent search of his property revealed a number of chemicals, including arsenic, mercury, and castor beans, the latter of which can be used to make the highly toxic compound ricin. Instructions for making ricin were also found on Kwan's computer. It appears that this may have been his original plan before he switched to the pesticide chemical believed to have been used in the crime. Prior to showing up at his mother's home on January 22, 2024, Kwan reportedly called Patrick posing as an official from the country's National Health Service. Under the guise of a home care visit, Kwan set up an appointment with him and even forged NHS documentation. The plan got even wilder though. To disguise himself during the crime, Kwan put on a ridiculous-looking cheap wig and fake facial hair underneath the mask he was wearing. He told Patrick that he was a nurse named Raj Patel and apparently tried to speak with a thick South Asian accent. He also equipped his car with false license plates. According to local media, Kwan had been engaging in unsettling behavior well before the attempted murder. In November of 2022, police were called to his mother's home after he burst inside. And after that, he had installed spyware on her computer so that he could secretly monitor her finances. After being arrested and charged, Kwan initially pleaded not guilty to attempted murder, though he changed his plea after hearing the prosecution's case against him during the beginning of court proceedings last week. He ended up pleading guilty and is expected to receive a hefty sentence in the coming days. Authorities in the Thai capital of Bangkok say that a local man is in custody this week following a dramatic police operation in response to a dangerous multi-vehicle arson, a crime that the suspect reportedly blamed on his addiction to a mobile video game. The whole thing began at around 7 a.m. on October 20th, when police were called to a private parking lot in the city's Pattaya district. Concerned citizens had started calling in reports after they said that they had witnessed a man dousing vehicles in gasoline and setting them on fire. When officers arrived, they found 3 cars, a Mitsubishi Expander, a Toyota Vios, and a Chevrolet Optra, all of which had been torched. Thankfully, the fire was able to be put out before it spread further, and no people were injured. However, the vehicles were in rough shape. Based on surveillance footage and witness statements, police were pointed to a 44-year-old local man identified only by the name Pantap. They traveled to a 2-story house belonging to his sister a short distance away to arrest him, but when they arrived, the case took another dramatic turn. Rather than come quietly, the 44-year-old allegedly decided to confront police, who were armed with stun guns, batons, rubber bullets, shields, and other riot gear. After climbing on the roof of the kitchen, Pantap reportedly began brandishing a 3-foot-long machete. One officer was injured when the 44-year-old swung the blade at him, causing him to fall. Police initially employed stun guns to try and bring Pantap down. However, it wasn't until rubber bullets were fired at the 44-year-old that the situation finally came to an end. After falling from the roof himself, Pantap was treated for injuries before being arrested. At the time of this recording, the 44-year-old remains in custody and is now awaiting formal charges. According to police, following his arrest, Pantap blamed his actions on a gaming addiction, telling them that he was addicted to the mobile game Arena of Valor. Specifically, Pantap claimed that the game was causing him severe stress and that this is why he had carried out the arson. Apparently, the 44-year-old was unemployed at the time of the incident. Authorities in northern Greece say that a 28-year-old man has been convicted and sentenced in connection with quite the bizarre case this week after he was caught repeatedly sneaking into his neighbors' homes and properties so that he could sniff their shoes. According to reports, the 28-year-old man in question, who has not been identified by name, was arrested in the early morning hours of October 8th after he was caught in the act by one of the victims at a residence in the town of Sindos, just outside the city of Thessaloniki. The homeowner told police that he had found the 28-year-old in his front yard while he was in the middle of smelling he and his family's shoes, which had been placed there to air out. During court proceedings this week, the 28-year-old told officials that he was extremely embarrassed by his behavior, which he said he was unable to explain. He stressed that he had no intention of harming anyone or breaking the law, but simply felt a compulsion to sniff his neighbor's footwear. While neighbors testified that the 28-year-old had never shown any signs of aggressive behavior during his bizarre early morning visits, they had become something of a pattern as the man had been caught multiple times in the months prior. They had asked the man's family repeatedly to get him to stop, but it seems like he couldn't help himself. This week, the man was handed a 1-month suspended sentence for the series of strange break-ins. He was also ordered to attend therapy sessions. Authorities in the German state of North Rhine-Westphalia say that a 36-year-old pizzeria owner is in custody this week after he was busted for dishing out quite the illegal secret ingredient at his restaurant. According to police, the whole thing started back in March when they were tipped off by food inspectors about suspected criminal activity at the pizzeria in question, located in the city of Düsseldorf. Members of the city's drug squad began an investigation, one which uncovered a rather interesting hidden menu item. Authorities discovered that when customers selected the number 40, their order came with more than just pizza. Specifically, they alleged that the item was a front for distributing cocaine, among other drugs. After collecting a decent amount of evidence, officers went to the apartment of the pizzeria owner, 36-year-old Michael Graf von Moltke. When they did, Moltke apparently tried to dispose of evidence by throwing a bag of drugs out of his window. Unfortunately, it landed right in the hands of one of the investigators. Further searches turned up 3.5 pounds of cocaine, more than 14 ounces of marijuana, and roughly $290,000 worth of cash. Moltke was arrested at the scene. However, when he was released a few days later, he allegedly went right back to selling drugs in the exact same way. Police apparently didn't mind though, because through continuing to investigate the 36-year-old, they were able to uncover his entire supply chain. After busting all of those guys, they came back and arrested Moltke all over again. At the time, he was apparently trying to flee the country. He later told police, quote, "The number 40 was one of the best-selling pizzas." Currently, he and as many as 12 other suspects remain in custody, though no specifics about charges have been released. Authorities in the Scottish city of Edinburgh say that a pair of young men really failed to think through the situation that they were in last week, when one of them was charged with uninsured driving, only for the other to attempt to pick them up in a second uninsured vehicle. According to reports, the real-life comedy sketch played out sometime on October 16th, when the first man's vehicle, a blue BMW, was spotted by police in Edinburgh's Gayfield district. After it was determined that the vehicle was uninsured, the vehicle was seized, the man was charged with uninsured driving, and he was forced to call a friend for a ride home. Unfortunately, when that friend arrived, the pair didn't make it very far. You see, after he got there, police learned that his silver Mercedes was also uninsured. The second suspect was also charged, and his car was similarly seized. Both men were then left to figure out another way home, though presumably decided it was probably best not to reach out to another acquaintance with a dodgy driving record. While speaking about the case this week, Edinburgh police said that they were, quote, left in disbelief over the stupidity of what had happened. They went on to write in a statement on social media in part, quote, first rule of being rescued is, make sure your rescuer has insurance. At the time of this recording, neither of the men's names have been released, and they have been identified only as a 19-year-old and 23-year-old. Their vehicles remain impounded. A 35-year-old British thief was swiftly arrested and sentenced to jail time this week, following a smash-and-grab robbery where he reportedly attempted a bizarre swimming escape. The whole thing began sometime on the evening of October 19th, when the man in question, 35-year-old Chad Lambert, walked into a store in the city of Bristol. After noticing that he was behaving strangely, staff there asked him what he was doing, only for the situation to take a startling turn. According to reports, Lambert smashed a window to get behind the store's counter, at which point he stole a bottle of wine and took money from the cash register. The employees attempted to stop him, but this apparently only made the 35-year-old angrier and more threatening. Upon making off with the stolen items, Lambert presumably realized that police would be on his tail, so he attempted to make a quick escape. However, it seems he didn't really think it through. After running to nearby Eastville Park, he dumped a bag and some of his clothing before heading into the water of Eastville Park Lake and swimming to a small island in the middle. It wasn't hard for authorities to find Lambert, especially after they went to the park and sent up drones with thermal imaging cameras. Footage of these drones has since been released by Avon and Somerset Police, which shows the 35-year-old attempting to hide behind a tree on the small island. Also, I should point out that though this area is called Eastville Park Lake, it's really more of a pond. In other words, a really foolish place to trap yourself if you were trying to remain hidden. Sure enough, within a short time, police were able to obtain a boat, which they used to go across and place Lambert under arrest. This week, Lambert pleaded guilty to aggravated burglary and was sentenced to 26 weeks in prison. He has also been ordered to pay £154 in compensation for the crime. Authorities in the Thai province of Pathum Thani were treated to quite the strange situation last week after they were called about an unusual type of theft, only for the suspect in the case to offer an equally bizarre excuse for his actions. The whole thing started recently when the caretaker of a chicken coop in Lam Luk Ka District called local police saying that he needed to report a crime. The man stated that someone had broken into his coop and had made off with a prize fighting rooster, one that he said was worth 100,000 baht, or about $3,000 US. When officers arrived and checked the situation out, they discovered that CCTV cameras had captured footage of the crime in progress. The footage showed a thief pulling up on a distinctive blue and white Yamaha motorcycle before making off with the valuable bird. Police were able to use the footage to track the suspect, later identified as a 30-year-old man named Jarunrat, to his home. When they got there, they not only found that motorcycle they had seen in the surveillance video, they found the missing rooster. After being caught red-handed, Jarunrat apparently offered this strange explanation. He claimed that he only stole the bird because he wanted to keep it as a pet. According to reports, the 30-year-old was arrested and is now awaiting charges. Authorities in Thailand's Chonburi province say that they are investigating an unhinged act of domestic violence this week after a woman allegedly drove her vehicle into her lover after she became enraged over him going on a 4-day drinking bender with his friends. The whole thing began at around 1 p.m. on November 4th, when police in the town of Nong, Prue were called to a parking lot near a local temple. They arrived to find a 42-year-old man, identified only by the name Anorak, who was suffering from visible injuries to his head and back, as well as bruises across his body. Upon being asked what had happened, Anorak told police that his girlfriend, a 57-year-old woman named Pon, had hit him with her pickup truck. He said that she was mad at him because they were having a fight, and that every time they got into an argument, she resorted to violence. He was taken to a hospital, though not before breaking down into tears over the situation. It turned out that Pon wasn't very difficult to find. Not only had the wild vehicular attack been partially caught on surveillance footage, but she was apparently still sitting in her orange truck less than 200 yards away. When confronted about what was going on, Pon reportedly told police that Anorak was her secret lover. She had a husband who was working and living outside of the country, but in the meantime, she had been cheating with Anorak for about 4 years. However, she said she was sick of his behavior and that the final straw for her was when he didn't come home for 4 days. She had found him that afternoon drinking with his friends and said she snapped when they insulted her. She apparently fully admitted to what she had done and allegedly told officers she hoped Anorak was hurt. In addition to being vindictive, it turned out that Pon was also a bit of a hypocrite. Despite being so angry with Anorak about his supposed bender, according to police, she was completely wasted at the time of the incident as well. Currently, Pon has been charged with drunk driving and her license has been suspended for at least 6 months. Police say that more charges will likely follow, though it depends whether Anorak wants to pursue legal action. A group of would-be thieves apparently overestimated their abilities both as criminals and as athletes this week when they allegedly attempted to rob the residents of a swanky country club estate and instead were caught while struggling to swim away from the crime scene. The whole thing took place on the morning of November 5th at the Estancias del Pilar Country Club, a gated luxury community in the city of Pilar. The country club features 8 neighborhoods and is home to more than 1,200 families. As you might imagine, it's a high-income area, something that evidently attracted the attention of the 3 suspects involved in this case. Armed with guns, the men, later identified as 20-year-old Elias Romero, 30-year-old Nicolas Rios, and 33-year-old Carlos Ibanez, allegedly attempted to sneak into the community with the intention of robbing residents as well as the country club itself. Unfortunately for the suspects, they didn't make it very far before they hit a serious roadblock. Before they'd even made it past the perimeter fence in the Champagnat neighborhood of the community, they triggered an alarm that quickly attracted the attention of security personnel and police. When confronted, the suspects reportedly shot at officers, hitting one of them in the leg. They then attempted to flee in a stolen vehicle, though only made it a little ways before becoming stuck. Out of apparent desperation, the men tried one last method of escape: swimming across the large lake in the north of the estate. However, it turned out they weren't exactly Olympians. Rios and Ibanez were quickly caught, while Romero managed to stay in the water a little longer. His escape attempt was no less futile, though, as you can see from this video released by police of him clearly struggling to swim. In the footage, police can be heard jokingly encouraging the 20-year-old, shouting things such as, quote, "Go on, there's not much left," and "Come on, last little bit of effort." When Romero finally did make it back to shore, he was promptly arrested alongside his alleged accomplices. At the time of this recording, all 3 men remain in custody and are facing a slew of charges, including attempted homicide, aggravated robbery, illegal possession of a firearm, and resisting arrest. The officer who was wounded in the shooting was taken to a local hospital and is said to be recovering well. Authorities in the South Korean capital of Seoul say that a U.S. live streamer has officially been indicted and is facing serious prison time this week, following months of obnoxious behavior while touring around the nation. Actions which have already gotten him kicked out of other countries and have earned him widespread backlash and condemnation. The man in question is 24-year-old Ramzi Khalid Ismail, better known by his online name Johnny Somali. And if you followed streaming-related news over the past couple of years, chances are you've already heard of him. For those unfamiliar though, Johnny Somali has created an entire career out of being, over want of a better word, a complete dickhead. His claim to fame is essentially traveling to countries and making as much of a public nuisance of himself as possible, all in the name of quote-unquote entertainment. To give you a few examples, during the 24-year-old's time in Japan last year, he harassed commuters on the subway with insulting comments about the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombings, played loud and offensive noises and music on his phone inside restaurants and other businesses, and was arrested for sneaking onto a construction site while screaming "Fukushima" at workers there. This is by no means an exhaustive list, and unfortunately it was part of a broader problem at the time of streamers pulling stunts like this in Japan for attention and views. You may have also heard about the trend of influencers sneaking onto Japanese high-speed trains without paying and trying to avoid staff by hiding. Incidents like these caused major public backlash and anti-foreign sentiments in the country, and ended with tourists straight up being banned from certain areas, as well as some businesses. Even after being kicked out of Japan, though, Johnny Somali apparently learned nothing. Despite his relatively small following and his repeated bans across numerous platforms, including YouTube and Twitch, he was allowed to keep making content on Rumble. He went on to carry out similar antics in Israel before turning his attention to South Korea earlier this year. I'm not going to be able to list everything he's accused of doing here, because again, the list is quite long. A lot of it was similar to what he was doing in Japan, but there are two incidents in particular that have generated a ton of public outrage. Perhaps the most infamous of these happened on October 7th, when the 24-year-old went to the Statue of Peace, a memorial dedicated to the so-called comfort women of the Second World War. These were women who were victims of sexual slavery during the Japanese occupation, and it's a very important monument to a lot of South Koreans. While there, Johnny Somali filmed himself kissing, twerking, and dancing on the statue, which understandably, a lot of South Koreans found wildly offensive. The second incident is the one that the 24-year-old is actually in legal trouble for, and it happened on October 17th. That's when Johnny Somali is accused of walking into a convenience store, assaulting staff, and pouring a bowl of noodles all over a table after being told he couldn't drink alcohol in there. A couple of weeks ago, the 24-year-old was taken into custody by police, who apparently initially did this for his own safety. He had been attacked at least 3 times on the street by locals, including another live streamer with a military background in the South Korean Navy. While in custody, though, he reportedly acted like a huge asshole again, and at some point was allegedly found to be in possession of unspecified narcotics. Right now, the 24-year-old has only been indicted on charges related to the October 17th convenience store incident. However, according to reports, if authorities go after him for the drugs, he could be looking at up to 10 years in prison. Apparently, Johnny Somali has changed his tune a little since his recent legal trouble, and has become a lot more apologetic. However, reports we came across also pointed out that he's done this before, including in Japan, where he claimed he was just a young man who had made some mistakes. At the time of this recording, the 24-year-old has been barred from leaving the country until further notice. It remains to be seen where the case will go from here. Authorities in the Thai city of Pattaya say that they are investigating quite the unusual case this week after a woman had a pair of her underwear stolen, only for the repentant thief to return to the scene of the crime a short time later and beg for forgiveness. The whole thing reportedly began just after 3 a.m. on November 10th, when the owner of a local laundromat, identified as a 42-year-old woman named Kai, walked into a Pattaya City police station saying that she needed to report a crime. Kai stated that she had just had a very bizarre experience with an unnamed man who she said had stolen a pair of one of her customers' underwear. Kai explained that earlier that evening, she and her daughter had been working away as usual when a well-dressed man pulled up outside in his car. The man strolled in, started rooting through a laundry basket, and slipped something into the pockets of his pants. He then began heading for the door. Kai's daughter confronted the man, but he reportedly claimed he was there picking up his own clothes. He seemed very calm, so at first the daughter apparently believed him and let him go. However, things got a whole lot stranger when the same man came back a few hours later, this time carrying a white envelope. Inside was 1,000 baht, or about $30 USD, an apology letter, and a black women's G-string. The G-string was apparently the thing he had slipped into his pocket when he was in there earlier. Kai turned over the note to police, which contained the thief's strange apology. It read, quote, "From what I did today, it made me feel very stressed, very bad about what I did and caused trouble to others. I apologize to the shop and the owner of the clothes for what happened. I would like to compensate for the damages as a punishment for myself so that I will learn my lesson. Please forgive me and do not press charges against me. I will remember this as a lesson and will not do it again." While it's unclear if anything more will be done about the incident, police say they are holding on to the surveillance footage that Kai provided just in case. In the meantime, it was a local news outlet that perhaps summed up the situation best, stating, quote, "The saga of the repentant panty snatcher serves as a curious reminder to think twice before giving in to such peculiar impulses or fetishes." Authorities in Japan's Kanagawa Prefecture reportedly found themselves in the middle of quite the disturbing incident this week after they arrested a suspected pervert, only to realize the situation was even more concerning than it initially seemed. The whole thing started on November 17th, when the man in question, 55-year-old Tomohiro Suzuki, was caught while allegedly taking voyeuristic photos at a game center in Tokyo's Shibuya ward. After being brought in for an interview, police reportedly went through his phone, where they made a startling discovery. The thing was apparently littered with pictures and footage of a woman's underwear, ones that it looked like he had shot himself. Upon further questioning, police were able to piece together the strange and unsettling circumstances behind the photos and videos. The whole thing was creepier than they ever could have imagined. Authorities now allege that sometime back in June, Suzuki went into a bag belonging to one of his female subordinates at work and stole her apartment key. Before she noticed, he made a duplicate and returned the key, after which he began going inside her unit in the city of Yamato while she wasn't home. In addition to taking photos and videos of the female victim's underwear, the 55-year-old also allegedly set up miniature cameras in her kitchen and bathroom. This wasn't a one-off thing either. According to police, he had been in the woman's apartment around 40 times before he was finally caught, with the most recent incident happening just 2 days before the situation at the game center. From the way it sounds, the female victim had no idea any of this was happening. When confronted about all of this, Suzuki apparently offered a partial confession, though bizarrely claimed he didn't mean the woman any harm and just enjoyed looking at her underwear. He stated in part, quote, "I did go into her apartment because I liked looking at her underwear, but I never planned to steal anything. I had feelings for her." Police say that Suzuki was arrested on suspicion of attempted theft and breaking into the apartment, though it's unclear if he's yet facing formal charges. Authorities in Japan's Fukuoka Prefecture say that they are investigating a bizarre situation this week after what started out as a routine trespassing call took quite the unusual turn. The whole thing began at around 1 p.m. on November 25th when police in the city of Dazaifu received a call from a local woman. The woman stated that she and her husband had seen a strange man sneaking around inside the walled garden of their property. When the man realized he'd been spotted, he tried to run. However, the husband had managed to catch him. When officers arrived at the scene, they spoke to the still detained man, later identified as 37-year-old Yuta Sugawara. That's when things got truly weird. Sugawara reportedly admitted to what had happened right away, telling police that the whole thing was incredibly thrilling for him. He said that the nervous excitement of wondering whether he'd be caught helped to relieve his stress. At this point, you might be thinking to yourself, damn, this guy really needs a hobby. And, well, that's what's so peculiar about this whole situation. You see, Sugawara claimed that sneaking onto private properties was his hobby, telling police, quote, "My hobby is trespassing. It's exciting and fun wondering if I'll be spotted." He went on to claim that he had done this over 1,000 times. Sugawara was arrested on suspicion of trespassing, though it's unclear if he has been formally charged. Despite the 37-year-old's claims that he never actually went into people's houses, police say that they aren't taking him at his word and are currently investigating whether he has been involved in any other crimes. Representatives from the UK's HM Revenue and Customs Department say that a 56-year-old fraudster has officially been sentenced to prison time this week after his 3 years on the run recently came to a ridiculous end when he was caught because he was too lazy to pick up a fast food order. The case began back in 2021 when the man in question, 56-year-old Robert Kemp, was brought up on charges related to a tax fraud scheme he had been running with his son Marcus. According to reports, the father and son duo claimed to run a company that supplied windows for new homes. Between May and November of 2015, it said that the pair submitted a litany of fraudulent invoices claiming reimbursements through the value-added tax system. By doing this, Kemp and his son were apparently able to scam over £251,000, or $317,000 US. Both men admitted to what they had done back in 2021. However, only Marcus decided to face the music, so to speak. He was sentenced to 2 years and 2 months in prison, while Kemp stopped attending court hearings and went on the run. For nearly the next 3 years, police reportedly looked for Kemp to no avail. That was, until his own laziness got him caught. Sometime earlier this year, authorities learned that the 56-year-old was hiding out in the Welsh town of Rhyl after he apparently ordered a $23 doner kebab to be delivered to his one-bedroom apartment. This is even more ridiculous when you know that the takeout place he ordered from was less than half a mile away, meaning he likely could have easily gone and gotten his food in person without blowing his cover. This week, authorities announced that Kemp had finally been jailed for 2 years and 2 months on the tax fraud offenses. In addition to his original sentence, he must also serve 2 months for going on the run and 12 months for an unrelated affray charge. Speaking about the incident, a spokesperson for the Revenue and Customs Department said, quote, "This case shows that we don't forget and we don't give up. We can and do use a range of tools to track down fugitives and bring them back before the courts to face justice. Tax fraud is not a victimless crime. The tax we all pay helps to fund the public services we rely on." Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much, everyone, and take care.